Two bags of rice can carry exactly the same label, white, long grain rice, and still contain completely different levels of arsenic. Whole Foods test results make this clear in practice. The difference isn't about brand or price. It comes down to two details on the label. I'll show you exactly which ones. Plus, four more things about the rice on American store shelves that don't appear on the packaging. And three options you can grab without overthinking it. One rule applies to any bag of rice on the shelf, regardless of brand. Look at two things on the label: the type of rice and where it was grown. There's no U.S. law limiting arsenic levels in regular rice, only a cap for infant rice cereal. So the only tool a shopper has is the label. The 8 examples below show why these two details matter more than the brand name on the package. First, the highest arsenic reading in the entire 2025 study came from a sample of First Street long grain brown rice, purchased at a Smart and Final store in Los Angeles. 201 parts per billion of inorganic arsenic, double the infant limit. Among the samples that exceeded 150 parts per billion was also Rouse's Market long grain brown rice. The researchers note directly a single tested container doesn't reflect a brand's, but it does reflect what a shopper could actually have bought on one particular day. Second, high arsenic levels aren't limited to American rice or to brown rice varieties. Among the samples exceeding 150 parts per billion was organic arborio risotto rice under the Seggiano brand, imported from Italy, a type of rice usually associated with premium Italian cooking rather than mass production in the southern U.S. This shows that a high price and European origin guarantee nothing on their own. Arboreal as a grain type averaged among the highest heavy metal levels of any category tested in the study. Third, parboiled rice, often labeled parboiled or converted on the package, is rice treated with pressurized steam before milling. According to the study, this process alters starch structure in a way that promotes arsenic retention, which explains the higher readings the FDA has recorded in parboiled rice. The researchers add an important detail. There is an alternative parboiling method, removing the husk before cooking rather than after, that lowers arsenic levels by roughly a quarter. But a shopper in a store has no way of knowing which method was used to process a specific bag. Fourth, cadmium is a separate heavy metal rarely mentioned alongside arsenic, though the study tested for it as well. 3 samples showed cadmium levels above 100 parts per billion, higher than any of the tested alternative grains. Signature Select basmati rice, Kroger basmati rice, and Andes Charleston Gold rice. Basmati from India and arborio rice from Italy average the highest cadmium levels among all rice types, meaning the same grain type that helps lower arsenic doesn't necessarily help lower cadmium. This creates a genuine dilemma for shoppers, not just another item on a list of warnings. The researchers directly compared the two metals. Rice, on average, contains 28 times more arsenic than alternative grains like quinoa or pearl barley, but those same alternative grains contain, on average, 1.5 times more cadmium than rice. The FDA still hasn't determined the combined risk posed by all 4 metals together, so there's simply no authority that would set a priority between arsenic and cadmium. This means swapping rice for another grain lowers one risk while slightly raising another, rather than eliminating the problem entirely. Fifth, one sample turned out to be an exception to every rule about geography and grain type. Dixie Lily's parboiled yellow rice with saffron showed a lead level 32 times higher than the study average, the highest lead reading of any rice sample tested. The researchers suggest the cause isn't the rice itself, but the saffron. According to FDA data, some spices on the market are artificially colored with lead compounds to give a brighter hue. 2 samples of this product, bought 3 months apart from different batches, showed elevated levels. meaning the problem wasn't confined to one random package. 6. In 2012, Consumer Reports tested dozens of rice samples across different brands and recorded that a sample of Whole Foods 365 Everyday Value long grain brown rice showed arsenic levels roughly a third higher than other brands tested at the time. The organization itself cautions that this was a one-time market snapshot. 13 years later, the 2025 study confirms the broader picture. Average arsenic levels in white rice have remained essentially unchanged since 2012, despite years of public attention to the issue. 7th, rice milk and rice syrup used as a sweetener in energy bars and ready-made infant cereals form a separate risk category. These products are often marketed as natural or organic alternatives. The word natural in this context doesn't mean safe. Organic rice absorbs arsenic from soil and water exactly the same way conventional rice does. 8th, geography on the label is the oldest and simplest trap. The phrase product of USA sounds like a mark of quality, but the bulk of rice produced in the U.S. is grown in Arkansas, Louisiana, Missouri, and Texas. According to the 2025 study, white rice from these regions, labeled simply USA, averaged 118 parts per billion of heavy metals, the highest reading among all white rice categories. By contrast, rice grown in California averaged just 65 parts per billion, the lowest result among every type of rice tested in the entire study. There's another detail that complicates the simple advice of buy California rice or imported basmati. As of April 2025, new U.S. tariffs apply to imported rice. 10% now with even higher rates, 36% on Thai jasmine and 26% on Indian basmati, set to take effect in July. Researchers at Healthy Babies Bright Futures note directly that California-grown rice already costs more than rice from other U.S. regions at the stores where it was purchased for the study. For families on a tight budget, this means rice with a higher arsenic level may remain the only affordable option, not from a lack of knowledge, but because of price. Arsenic can't be seen or tasted, so this isn't a test of authenticity, but a demonstration of a cooking technique recommended specifically by the Healthy Babies Bright Futures study. Take a cup of dry rice and add water at a ratio of 6 to 10 parts water to 1 part rice, roughly how you'd cook pasta. Bring it to a boil, cook until done, then drain off the excess water. According to the study, this method removes up to 60% of the arsenic from cooked rice. Simply rinsing rice before cooking, by contrast, doesn't produce a consistent result. This isn't free in another sense. Along with the excess water, some of the vitamins and iron added to white rice after milling also wash away. That's why the researchers recommend pairing rice cooked this way with iron-rich foods, legumes, leafy greens, meat. Pre-soaking adds a further effect on top of the cooking method itself. According to the same study, soaking rice in water for half an hour, or ideally overnight, before cooking it with the excess water method, increases arsenic loss even further compared to cooking without soaking. It takes time but requires no special equipment, just a bowl of cold water and a bag of rice left in it overnight. 3 options, all governed by the same rule, grain type plus growing region. The first option is rice grown in California. Calrose varieties, sushi rice, California jasmine. According to the 2025 study, this category showed the lowest average heavy metal level among all rice types tested, 65 parts per billion. This is a grain type and region you can find under various names on the shelf. The second option is basmati rice from India or jasmine from Thailand. These types averaged significantly lower arsenic levels than rice grown in the southeastern U.S., although Indian basmati showed elevated cadmium. So it isn't an ideal choice for someone specifically worried about cadmium, but it is a good option for lowering arsenic specifically. The third option is a store's own private label rice, but specifically the California, basmati, or sushi type, not generic long grain rice with no further specification. The rule from the second point applies equally to an expensive bag and a cheap one, grain type and origin. Worth avoiding separately, pre-cooked options, instant, parboiled, and ready-to-heat rice. Instant rice does show a lower overall heavy metal level, but researchers don't recommend it because of the risk of a particularly toxic form of arsenic that forms during the high-temperature processing used in manufacturing. A separate note for families with young children. Rice milk shouldn't be used as a primary alternative to cow's milk for children under 5. The UK's Food Standards Agency explicitly warns against this for children between 1 and 4.5 years old. The reason is the same. Rice milk regularly shows arsenic levels exceeding the federal drinking water limit of 10 parts per billion. For adults, this isn't the same threat it is to a still developing body, but the rule here is simple. The younger the child, the less sense it makes to replace dairy specifically with rice-based alternatives. None of these results come from a single random test. The Healthy Babies Bright Futures study covered 145 samples across more than 100 brands, purchased in 20 cities nationwide, from New York to Los Angeles and Miami. Brooks Applied Labs in Seattle, which specializes specifically in heavy metal analysis, tested every sample for 4 toxic elements simultaneously: arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury. Arsenic was found in all 145 samples without exception, cadmium in all but 1. 8 different products: Whole Foods, First Street, Seggiano, Rouse's Market, Signature Select, Kroger, Andes, Dixie Lilly, showed elevated results across 2 separate studies 13 years apart. Rice remains the most widely consumed staple food in the world and the foundation of the diet for more than 1 billion children. That's exactly why even small differences in arsenic levels, down to a single grain type or a single region, matter on a national scale, not just for one shopper in one store. This risk isn't distributed evenly across all families. Researchers estimate that for Asian children between 18 months and 2 years old, rice provides up to 55% of their entire daily dietary arsenic intake, roughly 7 times more than children from other ethnic groups, for whom rice isn't a daily staple. So these 8 examples aren't about an abstract shopper in general, but specifically about families where rice on the table isn't a side dish once a week, but food eaten every day. But the takeaway from all of this is singular, and it isn't about any particular brand. Don't look at the word USA on the bag. Look at the type of rice and where it actually comes from. That one rule is enough to stop guessing every time you're in the store.